"You're just waiting to die, Mom." She said it the way people brush crumbs off a table, carelessly, irritated, without realizing they've swept away something that mattered. I didn't answer. At 76, you learn that silence can be sturdier than any shouted reply. But the words settled inside me, heavy as a stone dropped into a well, and the echo didn't end even after Melissa slammed the door and hurried down the hallway of my apartment building, though neither she nor anyone else ever said it that way. I stayed at the kitchen table a long time. My tea had grown cold, but age teaches you not to waste things, even moments like this. The apartment was quiet, too quiet, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for me to break. I didn't. Grief has lived with me so long it knows its place. One chair away, not touching, not gone. Outside the window, the morning light was thin like watered-down milk. The apple tree in the courtyard had lost most of its leaves. I watched them circle the ground slowly. Everything falls eventually, but not all things vanish. Some settle, take root, and rise again when no one expects it. My joints ached when I stood, but pain has become an old companion. I moved slowly, straightening the tablecloth Melissa had pulled when she pushed her plate away. She'd barely eaten. She never did, when she came here to check on me, which usually meant instructing me. Sell this, move there, stop being an inconvenience to her tidy life. And every time, I'd try to keep the peace, remembering her as the newborn I once carried home in a blue blanket. I wondered, sometimes, if she remembered me from then. The woman who loved her more than breath, who worked 2 jobs so she could go to college, who skipped dinners so the child could have seconds. Apparently, she remembered something else entirely. I walked down the narrow hallway, touching the faded wallpaper. The building used to smell of fresh paint and lemon polish. Now it smelled of old carpets and the exhaustion of families living too close to each other. My late husband, Samuel, always said people don't grow distant. They simply stop looking in the same direction. Maybe that's why Melissa and I drifted so far that now, when she looked at me, she saw a burden, a ticking clock, something to be stored away for later disposal. In the living room, I paused beside the mantel. Photographs stood there like stubborn witnesses. Melissa at 12 holding a violin, Melissa at 18 in her prom dress, Melissa at 22 graduating with honors. In all of them, she was smiling. In all of them, I was standing somewhere nearby. There weren't many pictures of us together in recent years. She always said she didn't like how I looked older in photos. A silly reason, but it cut deeper than she knew. My hand trembled slightly as I lifted Samuel's picture. He would have known what to say today. He always did. "Don't let them shrink you, Ellie," he'd murmur, half smiling. "You're stronger than they remember." I set the frame back carefully. I didn't feel strong. I felt hollowed out, scraped by years of foolish patience. I went to the window again. Down in the courtyard, a young couple was arguing near the mailboxes. Their voices rose and fell like storm winds. It reminded me that life keeps moving, whether or not we're invited along. The clock on the wall ticked steadily. A small, persistent reminder that time wasn't finished with me yet. I breathed in slowly. The air tasted different this morning, sharper, clearer, as if the world had shifted just slightly under my feet. Maybe it had. Because even as Melissa's words echoed in me, something else stirred underneath. Something quiet, old, and iron strong. Not anger, not revenge. Just a simple, steady truth rising to the surface. I was not done. and I was not dying for anyone's convenience. The building around me, these walls, these floors, they held more of my life than Melissa knew. And tomorrow, when she returned, thinking I'd retreat into silence again, she'd learn just how wrong she was. Morning came colder than usual, the kind that settles into your bones before you've even left the bed. I dressed slowly, pulling on my thick gray cardigan. The one Melissa said made me look outdated, as if I were a piece of furniture she'd grown tired of. I buttoned it anyway. Comfort matters more than anyone's opinion at 76. I stepped into the hallway and locked my door. The metal clicked sharply, echoing down the long corridor of the building. Tenants were already moving about. Rushed footsteps, distant voices, the scent of burnt toast drifting from someone's cracked door. This building had always felt like a living organism, breathing, murmuring, complaining. I knew every sound it made. On the ground floor, the old elevator groaned open. Inside stood Mr. Carson, a widower from the third floor. His thin jacket was pulled tight, and he gave me a polite nod. "Morning, Mrs. Hayes." "Morning," I answered, stepping in beside him. He fiddled with the envelope in his hand before sighing. "Rent's going up again. Got the notice yesterday." He chuckled without humor. "Feels like this building is squeezing the life out of us." I kept my eyes on the elevator doors. "I'm sorry to hear that." He shook his head. "Doesn't matter. Whoever owns the place is bleeding us dry." Then he added softer, "Wish they'd think about the people who've lived here for decades." The elevator chimed, and he stepped out. I didn't correct him. I never did. Outside, the wind cut through my sleeves, but the crisp air woke something inside me. I walked to the pharmacy 2 blocks away. The clerk behind the counter barely glanced up when I approached. "Name?" he asked flatly. "Hayes." He typed without looking at me, chewing loudly on gum. "Insurance didn't approve your refill again. You'll need to call them." I nodded. It was always this way. Inconveniences that accumulated until one felt uncounted. I had the money to pay outright, but Melissa insisted on managing my finances since I'm too trusting with numbers. I almost smiled at the irony. Trust had never been the problem between us. Misuse of it, that was another matter. When I stepped back onto the sidewalk, the city felt busier than usual. People dodged around me as though old age were contagious. I walked slowly, letting them pass, letting their urgency trail behind them like smoke. My next stop was the post office. A thin line of customers stretched toward the counter. I took my place and waited, feeling the weight of my years only because no one else seemed to notice them. Ahead of me in line stood a young mother juggling a stroller, packages, and a toddler tugging at her sleeve. The boy dropped his toy car, and it rolled toward my feet. I picked it up carefully and handed it to him. He smiled, a small, genuine thing, warm as morning sunlight. His mother nodded gratefully. "Thank you." "You're welcome," I said, and for a moment the world felt less sharp. But outside, as I headed home, the feeling faded. A group of teenagers rushed past me, laughing loudly. One bumped my shoulder and didn't bother to apologize. I steadied myself on a lamppost. It wasn't malice. It was that I was invisible. Back at the entrance of the building, I paused when I saw our property manager, Jacob Finch, standing by the mailboxes with a clipboard. He looked up, startled, then forced a professional smile. "Oh, Mrs. Hayes didn't see you there." Of course he hadn't. "Morning," I said. He flipped a page quickly, as if hiding something. "Just checking units for next month's notices." "Another increase?" He laughed awkwardly. "Well, these things aren't up to me. The owner signs off on everything. I nodded. I see. He cleared his throat, lowering his voice. If you or your daughter ever need help, payment arrangements maybe, let me know. We try to be understanding. Understanding. A word used on people thought fragile, helpless, disposable. I'll keep that in mind, I said, though I didn't need to. I walked past him, listening to the familiar creak of the stairwell railing, the echo of footsteps from above, the faint hum of pipes within the walls. This building wasn't just where I lived. It was where I stood my ground, where I watched my daughter speak to me as though I were fading, where I'd been quiet for too many years. I climbed the stairs slowly, not from weakness, but to think. Carefully. Thoroughly. People believed I was simply waiting for the end. They had no idea what I'd been preparing for. Melissa showed up that evening without calling first. A habit she'd developed over the years, the way people walk into a room they believe they own. I heard her heels striking the hallway floor long before she tried my doorknob, found it locked, and knocked sharply. "Mom, open up. We need to talk." Her voice had that clipped tone she used with waiters and customer service agents, the tone that said, "I'm already irritated and you're about to make it worse." I didn't hurry. At my age, I move at the only pace that doesn't hurt. When I finally opened the door, she walked past me without waiting for an invitation. Her coat was expensive, her perfume sharper than usual. She always wore more when she wanted to disguise something. "Why is the place so dark?" she demanded. "It isn't dark. The sun just went down." I closed the door gently. "What's the matter, Melissa?" She turned, arms crossed, eyes bright with agitation. "I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday." Our conversation. As if it had been mutual. "And?" I asked quietly. "And you can't keep living like this," she snapped. "In this old apartment. Your health isn't good. You keep forgetting things. And I can't be running over here every time you have a crisis." I studied her face. The irritation. The self-importance. The certainty that she was heroically bearing the weight of my existence. "I don't recall asking you to run anywhere." "That's not the point," she said sharply. "Mom, you need supervision. You need to be somewhere with trained staff, a place where they can look after you." "Like a nursing home," I said. She didn't deny it. "Yes, exactly. It's time." I moved to the armchair and lowered myself into it, the fabric sighing under me. "Time for what, Melissa? For you to stop being inconvenienced by your mother?" She rolled her eyes, the same dramatic gesture she'd perfected as a teenager. "You always twist everything. I'm trying to help you. You said yesterday I was waiting to die." I let the statement sit between us like an object neither of us wanted to pick up. She blinked, startled. Not from guilt, but because I dared to repeat her words. "I was upset," she said quickly. "You take everything so personally. You know I didn't mean it literally. But you meant it." Silence stretched, thin and brittle. Melissa exhaled sharply. "Look, this isn't about yesterday. It's about the future. I talked to a place called Willow Pines. They have a room opening next month. It's a very nice facility, clean, modern, and they handle all the paperwork if the family helps with the financial guarantee." I looked at her. Really looked at her. My daughter, middle-aged, tired, angry at a life that hadn't given her the admiration she believed she deserved. She stood there waiting for me to collapse into agreement, as I had done so many times before. She expected reluctance, maybe even tears, but not resistance. "No," I said simply. Her eyebrows shot up. "What do you mean, no?" I'm not going anywhere. You can't stay here. Why not? Because this building isn't safe. The rent is too high. You're alone all day. My medications are my concern, I replied. And this building is safer than you think. She stared at me with a mixture of disbelief and annoyance, as if she couldn't comprehend that I was speaking to her as an equal, or worse, as someone who had the right to her own decisions. Mom, you're being irrational. No, I said softly. For the first time in a long while, I am being clear. Melissa's jaw tightened. So, you refuse my help. Again. I refuse to be moved like a piece of furniture. She looked around my apartment, her lips pressed into a thin line. Fine. Do whatever you want, but don't call me when something goes wrong. I can't keep cleaning up after you. There it was. The truth in her voice. Not concern, not love. Resentment. She picked up her purse, ready to sweep out dramatically. But before she reached the door, she turned. You can't live alone forever, Mom. Eventually, someone else will have to make decisions for you. I met her eyes. Calm, steady. We'll see about that. She left without another word, her heels clicking angrily down the hallway until the sound disappeared into silence. I closed the door. Her words had stung, but they no longer cut. Something inside me was shifting, slowly but unmistakably. The years of swallowing pain, of keeping peace at the expense of myself, were ending. And Melissa didn't even notice, but she would. Soon enough. The next morning, I woke with a dull ache behind my eyes, the kind that comes from thinking too much, not sleeping too little. Melissa's visit had unsettled me, but not in the usual way. I wasn't trembling or shrinking inward or rearranging myself to avoid upsetting her further. No, something else had settled into my chest. Something firmer, like a stone that finally found its rightful place. I made myself a small breakfast. Oatmeal, a sliced apple, tea. The quiet felt different today, not empty, intentional. At 9:30, I put on my navy coat and stepped into the hallway. My pace was unhurried, but every movement felt purposeful. I wasn't going to the pharmacy or the post office. Not today. I was going to the bank. The branch stood 3 blocks from my building, a polished glass rectangle that always seemed to glimmer even in dull light. Inside, warm air wrapped around me, along with the scent of ink and polished counters. A young teller noticed me approach and smiled politely, but I bypassed her and headed straight for the office at the end of the hallway. Mr. Blake, senior account manager. He'd been there for years, a gray-haired man in his late 50s who remembered details most people forgot, like how I took my tea and when Samuel used to come with me, wearing that ridiculous hat he thought made him look dignified. I knocked lightly. Come in, he called. He looked up from his computer, surprise flickering across his face, before shifting into genuine warmth. Mrs. Hayes, what a pleasure. Please, sit. I lowered myself into the chair across from him. Good morning, Robert. It's been a while, he said. Everything all right? I folded my hands in my lap. I'd like to review the documents for the Hayes Living Trust. His expression shifted, just slightly, but enough. Most clients never touched their trusts after setting them up, especially not ones my age. Of course, he said gently. Just give me a moment. He typed carefully, retrieving digital files, then opened a drawer and pulled out a thick folder. He placed it before me with the kind of respect reserved for things that mattered deeply. Here it is, established 26 years ago, amended twice. What would you like to look at? All of it, I said simply. He nodded, adjusting his glasses. Take your time. I opened the folder. The papers were crisp despite their age, the ink still dark, my signature looping steadily on every page. I traced one finger gently along the top sheet, feeling the familiar drag of textured paper under my skin. This trust had been Samuel's idea, a way to secure our assets after he passed, to shield them from taxes and legal complications, to ensure I would always have a place of my own. We had put everything in it: savings, investments, and eventually the building. Back then, the building wasn't worth nearly as much. It was old, drafty, in need of repairs, but Samuel had believed in its bones. "This place will outlive all of us," he'd said. He'd been right. I turned the page, scanning the clauses. The ownership was clear. The trustee name even clearer. Eleanor M. Hayes, sole trustee, sole beneficiary. Everything was still intact. Melissa had never bothered to ask. She assumed everything I had was ordinary, depleted, or attached to her in some automatic way. She'd forgotten, or never realized, that sometimes a quiet woman keeps the biggest things silent. "Are you considering any updates?" Mr. Blake asked after a few minutes. I looked up. "Not today. I just wanted to remind myself." He smiled softly. "You're in an excellent financial position, Mrs. Hayes. More secure than most people in this building." That made my lips twitch. A small, private smile. "Yes," I said. "I suppose I am." I closed the folder, pushing it gently toward him. "Thank you, Robert." "My pleasure," he replied. "And Mrs. Hayes." He hesitated. "If you ever need assistance managing any family-related matters, you know you can come to me." I know. And I did know. But this time, I wasn't here because I felt lost. I was here because clarity was returning to me after many years of letting others speak over me. When I stepped outside, sunlight cut through the clouds, washing the pavement in pale gold. I breathed in, slow and deep. Something in the air felt lighter, as if a door had opened inside me. For decades, I'd been told what I needed, what I couldn't handle, what was best for me. But the truth sat quietly in my purse. The trust documents that held every right, every decision, every inch of control that Melissa believed she had over me. She saw an old woman clinging to an outdated apartment. She didn't see the owner of the building, not yet, but soon enough she would. Melissa didn't wait long before reappearing in my doorway. The sun was barely beginning to set, staining the hallway windows a murky orange, when I heard her knock. 3 fast, impatient taps, the kind she used when she came not to talk, but to direct. I opened the door slowly. She didn't even greet me. "Mom, we need to settle something," she said, brushing past me as though I were a draft of cold air instead of a person. Her heels clacked across my living room floor, stopping beside the small table where my mail lay in an orderly stack. She glanced at it, then at the room, her lips tightening. She never liked how tidy I kept things, said it made her feel guilty for not doing the same. "What is it this time?" I asked softly. She inhaled sharply, as if preparing for battle. "The building manager sent out notices today. Rent is going up again. A significant increase. You can't possibly afford it." I watched her closely. There was something jittery beneath her irritation, something that felt less like concern and more like strategy. "I've managed before," I replied. "That's because I've helped before," she snapped. "But I can't keep doing this, Mom. I have my own expenses." Her own expenses. The trips, the new furniture every year, the memberships to overpriced gyms she rarely visited. Of course. She paced across the room, her words rising like steam. You're living in a building that's too expensive, too old, too big. Whoever owns this place doesn't care about people like you. They just want money. I let her talk. She preferred monologues to conversations. And so, she concluded, spinning toward me, I think it's time you considered selling off whatever's left in your account and letting me handle things. I could manage the paperwork, arrange a move, get you situated, but you need to release some of this control you think you still have. The phrasing struck me. Whatever's left. What you think you still have. Not once did she ask what I wanted. I walked to the kitchenette, turned on the kettle, and leaned lightly against the counter. So you're asking for money? No, she said quickly, too quickly. I'm asking to help you manage your finances responsibly. And the difference between the two? She blinked. Mom, don't start with your... I held up a hand, quieting her. Melissa, tell me plainly. What do you want? I want you to stop pretending everything's fine. Her voice cracked just a little. I want you to stop acting like you're capable of handling things alone. You're 76. You forget appointments. You misplace bills. You get confused. I met her eyes then. Really, met them. No, Melissa. I don't get confused. I just stopped correcting you. She froze. The kettle clicked off behind me. I didn't rush to pour the water. I let the silence expand, fill the room, settle into the spaces she never let silence exist. Do you think I don't notice what you ask for? I continued quietly. The things you hint at. The repairs you say you can't afford. The emergencies that come at the exact moment you want something new. That's not fair, she muttered. It's accurate, I corrected. She swallowed hard, composure slipping. Mom, I'm trying. I am. But it's hard. And this rent increase is not your concern. Her head jerked up. Shock flashed across her features. Melissa had grown so used to speaking over me that hearing a boundary must have sounded like a foreign language. Not my concern, she repeated. That's right. She let out a short, disbelieving laugh. Unbelievable. So what, you'll just pay it? Out of thin air? If necessary. And when you run out? She stepped closer, her voice rising. When you can't afford your medication or groceries because you're too proud to let your daughter help you? I looked at her, feeling something inside me settle, like dust in a room finally still. I'm not too proud, I said. I'm too aware. Her frustration sparked again. Aware of what? Aware that help from you always comes with a cost. She clenched her jaw. I can't believe you think so little of me. No, I murmured. I've thought too much of you for too long. Her face flushed, whether from anger or shame, I couldn't tell. Maybe she couldn't either. She grabbed her purse abruptly. Fine. If you want to live in denial, be my guest. Just don't expect me to fix things when it all collapses. I opened the door for her. Good night, Melissa. She stormed out, her heels stabbing the floor with every step. The sound echoed long after she disappeared down the hallway. When the silence finally settled, I poured myself a cup of tea. My hands were steady. I wasn't shaken by her anger anymore, because now I knew exactly where I stood. And soon, she would know exactly where she stood as well. I didn't sleep much that night, but not because of worry. My mind was too clear, too awake, as if all the noise that had filled it for the past decade had finally quieted enough for me to hear myself think. A strange feeling for a woman who'd spent years buried under other people's needs. By morning, the decision that had been circling inside me finally settled into place. I dressed in a soft beige sweater and dark slacks, brushed my hair the way Samuel used to like, and left the apartment with a steady step. Today was not for errands, not for Melissa, not even for myself, really. Today was for setting things straight. The law office sat on a quiet corner 2 blocks from the river, a small, dignified building with dark wooden doors and brass handles. I'd walked past it countless times, but hadn't entered in years. The last time I was there was to finalize the trust after Samuel's passing. That day, the walls felt too high, the air too thick. Today, everything felt appropriately sized. Inside, the receptionist, a young woman with timid eyes and firm posture, looked up. "Good morning. Do you have an appointment?" "No," I said softly, "but I'm hoping Mr. Renwick can see me?" Her eyes widened slightly. "Renwick wasn't a man you requested without reason. Let me check." While she disappeared through a back door, I stood still, listening to the muffled sounds of conversations behind the walls. Legal battles. Estate planning. Contracts being reshaped. It struck me that most people came here to guard what they feared losing. I had come here to reclaim what I had quietly held all along. The receptionist returned. "He'll see you now, Mrs. Hayes." Mr. Charles Renwick rose when I entered his office. He was in his early 60s, a composed man with a silver beard and eyes that missed little. "Eleanor," he said, extending his hand warmly. "It's been a long time." "Too long," I agreed as we sat down. He studied me with a faint, knowing smile. "What brings you in today?" I hesitated only long enough to gather my breath. "I'd like to make changes to my trust. And my will." His expression didn't change, but something sharpened in his gaze, an unspoken acknowledgement that such requests rarely came without a story. "Very well," he said gently. "What sort of changes are you considering?" I folded my hands in my lap, feeling the texture of my sweater beneath my fingertips. "I want to remove my daughter, Melissa, from any inheritance provision. Completely." He didn't flinch. Lawyers hear worse, but he leaned forward slightly. "Is this a sudden decision?" "No," I answered. "It's a long overdue one." "And who would replace her as beneficiary of the residual estate?" "My grandson," I said quietly. "Noah. He's the only one who visits because he wants to, not because he expects something." Renwick nodded thoughtfully. "Noah Hayes. I remember him coming here when he was small, well-mannered boy." "He still is," I murmured. "And he sees me, not as an obligation, as a person." Renwick took notes. "And regarding the building, do you wish to keep its ownership structure the same?" "Yes," I said. "The trust retains ownership. But I want to add stipulations. After my passing, Noah becomes successor trustee and beneficiary. Melissa has no access, no authority, and no claim." He wrote quickly now, the scratch of his pen steady and certain. I exhaled slowly, surprised at the calmness in my chest. I wasn't trembling. I wasn't unsure. I wasn't even sad. It felt right. Renwick looked up after a moment. "Eleanor, these are firm decisions. Once signed, reversing them is not simple. I don't want to reverse them." He studied me a long moment, then nodded. "Very well. I'll prepare the documents. We can sign everything later this afternoon, if that works for you." "It does." He closed his notebook, but didn't end the meeting. "One more question, if I may." "Yes?" "Is your daughter expecting access to your assets?" I let out a slow breath. "She expects control over them, over me, by extension." His eyes softened. "Then this is the correct step." We finalized arrangements, and I left the office with a sensation I hadn't felt in years, maybe decades: weightlessness. As I walked home, wind tugging gently at my sweater, I thought about how Melissa would react when she learned the truth. There would be shouting, tears, accusations. She'd say I was unwell, incapable, manipulated. She'd call every friend she had to ask whether they'd ever heard of a mother cutting off her own daughter. But I wasn't cutting her off. I was simply setting her down. There's a difference. When I reached the door to my apartment, I saw Noah sitting on the floor beside it, knees drawn up, backpack at his side. His face lit up when he saw me. "Grandma, I was worried. You didn't answer your phone." I smiled, unlocking the door. "Come inside, sweetheart." As he followed me in, I realized something quietly, profoundly. He was the only one who knocked on my door without expecting anything. And that, more than anything I owned, deserved protection. Noah followed me into the apartment with that gentle caution young people use around the elderly, as if one wrong movement might unbalance us. I didn't mind. His care was the kind that came from affection, not duty. A rare thing these days. He set his backpack down by the sofa. "Grandma, you sure you're okay? Mom's been acting strange since yesterday. She slammed a door so hard this morning she woke up the neighbor's dog." I almost smiled. Melissa had always believed volume equaled power. "I'm fine, sweetheart," I said, hanging my coat. "Sit with me a moment." We settled at the kitchen table. He took the chair Samuel used to sit in, though I never told him that. Some things you let happen because they feel right. Noah watched me carefully. He had his mother's sharp eyes, but none of her sharpness. "She said you two argued." "Your mother and I have many conversations," I answered. "Some louder than others." He huffed a small laugh, then grew serious. "Did she say something hurtful?" I looked at him. Really looked. 20 years old, shoulders still too narrow for the weight of the world, but already more grown than Melissa was at twice his age. "She did," I admitted. "But I'm not as fragile as she thinks." He stared at the table, running a fingertip along the wood grain. "Grandma, I worry about how she talks to you. It's like she forgets you're a person. Sometimes I think she sees you as—" He stopped himself. "A burden," I finished for him. "You don't have to protect me from the truth, Noah." He swallowed, nodding slightly. I reached across the table and took his hand. His fingers were warm, steady. "You've always been kind to me," I said. "That matters more than you know." He blinked hard, embarrassed by emotion. I don't like seeing you pushed around." "I'm not being pushed anymore." He looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" I hesitated. Not because I doubted myself, but because truth should be offered carefully, especially to the only person who gives without expecting anything in return. "There are things about my life your mother never cared to ask," I said gently, "and things I kept quiet because peace felt easier than honesty." He waited, not pressing, just listening. Another rare quality. "I've spent the last day putting those things in order," I continued. "And I want you to know, whatever happens between your mother and me, you're not caught in the middle." "Grandma, I don't care about the middle," he said softly. "I care about you." Those words warmed something inside me that had been cold too long. I squeezed his hand. "Then hear me when I say this. I am not powerless, and I am not dependent. I've simply allowed people to believe I was." His brow furrowed. "Grandma, what exactly are you saying?" I smiled, a small, quiet thing. "Only that change is coming, and I've made choices that will protect me and protect you." His eyes widened slightly. Me? Yes. I released his hand and stood, moving to the window. Outside, the fading daylight drew long shadows across the courtyard. You've shown me more loyalty in your short life than most people manage in their entire adulthood. I won't forget that. He rose slowly from his chair. Does Mom know about these choices? Not yet. And when she finds out? I exhaled, watching a couple in the courtyard argue over a grocery bag splitting open. People always seem to be rushing through life, tripping over their own urgency. When she finds out, I said calmly, she'll finally understand something she should have known a long time ago. What's that? I turned from the window and met his gaze, the same steady blue Samuel once had. That I am not waiting for anyone to decide how my life should end. I am deciding how it should continue. He looked at me with a mixture of admiration and something else. Something like relief. As if he'd been afraid I would break, but now saw steel where he expected weakness. Grandma, he said quietly, I'm proud of you. The words settled over me like a warm shawl. For the first time in years, I felt not just seen, but respected. And that was only the beginning. Noah left shortly after sunset, promising to come by the next day. The apartment felt quieter than usual when the door closed behind him. Not empty, just steady, like a deep breath held at the top of the lungs. I washed our 2 teacups, dried them carefully, and placed them back on the shelf. Such small rituals, but they make a life feel lived. I had just settled into my armchair with a blanket when the doorbell rang. Not a knock, a bell. Firm, purposeful. Melissa's way of announcing she was here to evaluate, not visit. I opened the door to find a woman standing beside her, a stranger holding a clipboard, wearing a neat blazer and a brittle smile. Melissa folded her arms triumphantly. Mom, this is Ms. Carter, she said. She's with Adult Wellness Services. She'll be doing a quick assessment. Assessment. The words slithered into my hallway like an unwelcome draft. I stepped aside, slowly. Melissa, what have you done? She breezed past me, the stranger in tow. Nothing dramatic. I just scheduled a standard evaluation to make sure you're still functioning safely on your own. You've been forgetful and difficult lately, so I thought... You thought you'd have me certified incompetent, I finished for her. Her eyes flashed. She hadn't expected me to say it aloud. That's not what this is, she insisted. This is for your own safety, Mom. Ms. Carter clasped her hands politely. Mrs. Hayes, if we could sit down for a moment, I'd like to ask you a few questions. No, I said. Both women froze. No? Melissa repeated, her voice pitching high. Mom, you don't get to refuse. I do, I said calmly. I am not obligated to participate in an evaluation I did not consent to, requested under false pretenses by someone who's angry I set boundaries. Ms. Carter blinked, clearly thrown off. Assessors expect confusion, defensiveness, rarely composure. Mrs. Hayes, she tried again, gentler this time. This is only to ensure your well-being. I looked her in the eye. My well-being is for me to ensure, not my daughter, not the state. A long silence followed. Melissa looked from me to the social worker, disbelief cracking her polished expression. She's manipulating you, she hissed. She's always been good at pretending she's fine when she isn't. Ms. Carter held up a hand. Ms. Hayes, may I speak with your mother alone for a moment? Melissa looked offended, but she nodded tightly and stepped toward the window. The social worker approached me with a softer expression. Mrs. Hayes, I'm required to ask, do you feel unsafe in your home? Has anyone threatened you? Pressured you? I almost smiled. Only with disappointment, and only from one person. She looked past me, toward Melissa. Understanding dawned. Are you in full control of your daily activities? She asked quietly. Yes. Do you handle your own finances? Completely. Do you have support if you need it? I thought of Noah sitting outside my door, waiting without expectation. I do, I said. She exhaled, a slow, relieved breath. Mrs. Hayes, you're perfectly capable. I see no justification for involuntary oversight, nor for further assessment. Melissa spun around. What? You just got here. With respect, Ms. Carter said gently, your mother is lucid, oriented, and fully autonomous. I'm closing the case. That's impossible, Melissa snapped. She forgets things all the time. She gets confused with documents. Your mother is perfectly competent, the social worker repeated. Any difficulties she has seem to arise from stress, not cognitive decline. I held her gaze. She understood. Melissa didn't. The evaluator packed her clipboard, said a polite goodbye, and left the apartment. The instant the door closed, Melissa erupted. How could you embarrass me like that? I folded my blanket over the armchair. Melissa, you invited someone into my home without my consent. Because you're not acting rational. You won't listen to me. You won't let me help. And now you're making a fool of... I'm protecting myself, I said quietly. Something I should have done a long time ago. She stared at me, chest heaving, words piled behind her teeth but unable to form. Mom, she said finally, voice shaking, why are you doing this? Because you've forgotten who I am, I answered. And it's time you remembered. Her face went pale. She left without slamming the door this time, just closing it softly, like someone afraid of what might echo back. By the end of the week, the building felt restless. People moved through the hallways with that particular tension tenants get whenever management announces changes. Snippets of conversations drifted through half-open doors, complaints about fees, rumors about new investors, speculation about whether rent would climb again. I listened quietly. People spoke more freely when they believed no one important was listening. Late Friday afternoon, a printed notice appeared near the mailboxes. Mandatory tenant meeting. Saturday, 6 p.m. Topic: rental adjustments and building policy. Updates. A crowd gathered instantly, buzzing with irritation. Mr. Carson shook his head, muttering, "They raise rent every 6 months now. Whoever owns this building must think we all have money flowing out of our ears." Behind him, a young woman added, "They don't care if we starve as long as we pay on time." No one noticed me standing by the bulletin board, folding the corner of the notice between two fingers. No one would have guessed the truth. Upstairs, I boiled water for tea and sat by the window, watching the courtyard fill with the early silhouettes of evening. Lights flickered on in other units. People settling in, unaware that the meeting tomorrow would reveal much more than they expected. The next day arrived cold and windless. At precisely 6, the meeting room on the ground floor filled with tenants, families, retirees, young professionals, all carrying a quiet dread. The building manager, Jacob Finch, stood at the front with a stack of folders and a nervous smile. Melissa slipped in moments later, breathless. She scanned the room, spotted me in a back corner, and stiffened. She hadn't known I was attending. Good. Jacob cleared his throat. Thank you all for coming. As you know, the building's ownership has recently approved new policies. Ownership, someone from the crowd interrupted. Who is the owner? We've been asking for years. That information is confidential, Jacob said reflexively. A ripple of frustration passed through the room. Melissa raised her hand with a crisp, authoritative gesture. Yes. Could we finally get some clarity on the rent increases? This building isn't exactly luxury housing. Several tenants nodded. Her voice carried. She enjoyed that. Jacob shifted uncomfortably. I assure you, decisions are made with the building's long-term improvements in mind. And what improvements are those? Melissa demanded. The elevators still break every month. The carpets are 20 years old. Where is our money going? He glanced at me then. I saw it. A small flicker of hesitation. A question. Should he reveal more? He didn't. Not yet. Instead, he adjusted his glasses. Rent adjustments follow guidance from the trust that owns the property. The word trust rippled through the room. Melissa leaned forward. So it's not a company? Not a corporation? Correct, Jacob said. Then who runs the trust? She pressed. Again, that's confidential. Her jaw clenched. I could almost feel the panic stirring beneath her irritation. She'd been losing ground with every day she failed to control me. And now she was learning there were bigger forces in motion, all of them beyond her reach. The meeting dragged on. Complaints, apologies, paperwork. Through it all, Jacob addressed me with a courtesy that didn't go unnoticed. Mrs. Hayes, if you have any concerns, please let me know personally. A few people turned toward me, surprised. Melissa's eyes narrowed. Afterward, the crowd filtered into the hallway, grumbling. I rose slowly, smoothing my skirt, when Melissa cornered me. Why did he talk to you like that? She demanded in a hushed whisper. Since when do you two know each other? We've known each other for years, I said calmly. That doesn't answer the question. It answers the one you asked, I replied. Her teeth clicked together, a sign of rising frustration. Mom, something is going on, and you're not telling me. I will, I said softly, when it's time. She stared at me, startled by the firmness in my voice. She had never heard me speak like someone who held a card she couldn't see. As she walked away, irritated and unsettled, Jacob passed me on his way out. He gave a small, respectful nod. Thank you for attending, Mrs. Hayes. Of course, I said. He hesitated, then lowered his voice. Everything is prepared on our end. Whenever you're ready. I nodded. Melissa, halfway down the hall, froze. She heard him. She just didn't understand. Not yet. Melissa didn't sleep that night. I knew it before she even called the next morning. Her voice came through the phone tight and clipped, pulled thin by anxiety she couldn't name. Mom, I need to ask you something. It's important. I stirred my tea. Go ahead. That man last night, Finch, the way he spoke to you. She paused, searching for the right accusation. Why did he say everything was prepared? I didn't answer right away. I heard the tremor in her breathing. Melissa feared two things, losing control and looking foolish. Yesterday, she'd felt both. Mom, she snapped, are you hiding something from me? I'm handling my affairs, I said calmly. That's all. Her frustration spiked. What does that mean? What affairs? Why didn't you tell me? I'm your daughter, I should know. There it was again. That belief that blood granted her a governing right over my life. A belief I'd fed by being silent too long. When it concerns you, I said, I'll tell you. This doesn't concern you. That's not your decision, she hissed. It is, I replied, and it always has been. The line went quiet. When she finally spoke, Her voice quivered with something sharper than anger. Fear. I don't understand what's happening. You will, I said softly. Soon. Because the truth had been walking toward her for years. She'd simply avoided looking up. By mid-afternoon, I went downstairs to check the mail. A cluster of tenants stood around the bulletin board again, whispering. Word travels fast in old buildings. Faster still when money is involved. It's the trust, Mr. Carson murmured to a neighbor. That's why things are changing. New policies. New management. Another tenant added, whoever runs it must be rolling in money. Probably some big-shot family. A woman near the back laughed bitterly. Whoever they are, they sure don't care about us. I slipped past them quietly, sorting through my envelopes. Medical statement. Bank notice. A letter from Noah's college. All the ordinary shapes of a life lived in steady rhythms. Behind me, I heard one of the tenants speak again. Wish we knew who the owner was. You'd think they'd show their face once in a while. I almost smiled, if only they knew. Upstairs, the hallway was dim, the afternoon light stretched thin across the worn carpet. I reached my door when footsteps approached fast from behind. Mom? Melissa. She'd come straight from work, still in her blazer, still tense around the mouth, as if the day had been chewing on her. Can we talk? She asked, not waiting for an answer. She stepped past me into the apartment. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for clues. Something's wrong. I can feel it. You're keeping secrets. You're meeting with people. You're different. Different? Yes, but only because she'd grown used to a version of me that bowed. She turned back to me, her voice quieter now, more fragile. Mom? Do you owe money? Are you in trouble? Is that why Finch talks to you like that? Is this trust connected to you somehow? She was close, painfully close to the truth. I walked to the kitchen counter and set down my keys. Melissa, what I do with my life, my money, and my choices is private. It's always been private. You simply never asked. I'm asking now, she said desperately. Please. I looked at her then, not with anger, nor with softness, but with a kind of clarity that had taken me decades to grow into. You're asking, I said, but not to understand me. You're asking to manage me. Her expression cracked, her eyes swimming with panic. No, Mom, I don't want to lose you. Ah, there it was. Not fear of my decline. Fear of losing access. I placed a gentle hand on the back of the chair. You won't lose me, Melissa, but you will lose the illusion that I'm dependent on you. She flinched as if I'd struck her. What does that mean? She whispered. It means, I said, that the things you think you control, you don't. Her breath caught. She knew, without knowing. She felt the truth circling her like a shadow she couldn't see yet. But soon, the light would shift. And she would. Melissa arrived 2 days later with a folder tucked under her arm. Thick, bulging, the kind that carried forms meant to corner someone. She didn't greet me. She simply walked inside, laid the folder on the table, and pressed her palm flat against it, as if steadying something restless inside her. Mom, she said, I need you to sign a document. I didn't sit. What kind of document? It's just a residency assurance form, she replied too quickly. It gives me legal permission to advocate for you in case of emergencies. Emergencies. Always that word, always with a shadow behind it. Show me, I said. She slid the paper across the table. The language wasn't subtle, though she hoped I would be. Durable authority, rights of decision, property oversight. the type of paperwork that quietly rearranged a life without making noise. "Melissa," I said calmly, "this is not a residency form. This is a control form." Her cheeks flushed. "Mom, don't be dramatic. Everyone my age helps their parents with these things." "Everyone your age," I answered, "doesn't try to take legal authority from someone who still wakes up every morning, cooks her own meals, pays her own bills, and reads every line she signs." She stiffened. "I'm trying to protect you." "No," I said. "You're trying to secure yourself." Her eyes flashed. Fear, anger, disbelief, all braided together. "Why would you think that of me? I'm your daughter. I'm the only one who shows up." I let that settle. It wasn't true, and she knew it. She knew Noah came by, called, cared. She simply didn't consider his presence valuable because he asked for nothing. I pulled out the chair and sat, looking at the paper again. "Melissa, tell me honestly, what are you afraid of?" She faltered. Just a second, but it was enough to reveal the truth beneath her indignation. "I'm afraid," she whispered, "that I won't have any say when things get worse for you. That someone else will make decisions. That I'll be shut out." I lifted my eyes to hers. "You're afraid of losing control." She swallowed hard. "Yes. And why do you think you need control over my life?" "Because I'm your daughter," she repeated, louder this time, as if volume could turn her claim into a fact. "Being my daughter gives you love," I said softly. "Not ownership." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. The silence between us thickened. She tapped the edge of the folder, fingers trembling. "Mom, if you don't sign this, I won't be able to help you." I folded my hands. "Melissa, when have you helped me without resentment?" Her breath hitched. The truth, spoken plainly, has a way of cracking the air. "You're pushing me away," she whispered. "No," I said. "I'm finally holding my own place." Her eyes flicked toward the paper again, desperate. "Please, if you would just sign, no." The word was quiet. It did not waver. Melissa stared at me as if she didn't recognize the woman sitting across from her. Perhaps she didn't. She'd grown accustomed to a mother who bent in all the places she pressed. Now I didn't bend. "Fine," she said, voice shaking. "If you won't sign it, then when things fall apart, don't come to me. I won't be responsible." "You haven't been," I answered gently. "Not for a very long time." Her face crumpled for the smallest moment. Pain or fury, I couldn't tell. Then she straightened, gathering her folder, her movements sharp and trembling. "This isn't over," she said. "It is," I replied. "You just don't know it yet." She left without looking back. The door clicked shut. For a long moment I stood in the quiet, feeling the tremor of what had just happened. Not from fear, from release. Melissa believed she had lost a battle, but she didn't understand. I had never been fighting her. I had simply stopped surrendering. Melissa avoided me for 2 days. That alone told me more than any argument could. When she went silent, it meant she was grasping for control in places she shouldn't be reaching. And sure enough, signs of her panic began to show before the week even ended. The first hint came in the form of a voicemail, breathless, hurried. "Mom, call me back. I need to ask you something. Actually, no, just call me." She hung up before finishing her sentence. That, too, was unlike her. Melissa never left space for uncertainty. She filled silence the way others filled rooms, with noise meant to drown out doubt. I didn't return the call. By afternoon, she showed up at my door, not bothering to hide the agitation twisting her features. Her makeup was slightly smudged, her hair pulled back too tightly. She'd been rushing, or crying, or both. "Mom," she said, pushing past me without waiting, "I need answers." I closed the door gently. About what? She paced the living room like a person searching for a fire she could swear she smelled but couldn't see. "I went to the bank," she began, voice strained. "I asked to speak with someone about your accounts. They wouldn't tell me anything. Not even whether you were overdrawn." "That's because you're not authorized," I said simply. Her head snapped up. "I am your daughter." "And the bank deals with clients," I replied, "not their daughters." Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. "So then," she continued after a shaky breath, "I went to the building manager. I asked him about the trust, about the rent increases, about who approves the policies." Ah, there it was, the path she should have left alone. "And?" I asked. "He refused to tell me anything," she said bitterly. "He claimed confidentiality laws. Confidentiality, as if I were some random tenant." "But you are a tenant," I reminded her. Her face reddened. "Mom, stop talking in riddles. I know something is going on. I know you know more than you're saying." I sat at the table and folded my hands. "Melissa, what is it you fear you'll discover?" She hesitated. This time, the pause wasn't dramatic. It was revealing. "Finally," she said, "that I'm being excluded." The words dropped slowly, as though dragged out of her. "That I'm losing influence. That you're making decisions without me." I nodded. "I am." She blinked, stunned by the lack of resistance. "Why? Why would you do that? I'm your only child." "Being my child," I said quietly, "doesn't entitle you to ownership of my life." Her fingers curled into fists, nails digging into her palms. "So the trust, it is connected to you, isn't it? Is that why Finch speaks to you with respect? Is that why he looked nervous when I questioned him?" Her voice trembled now, thin with dread. She wasn't ready for the truth, but it was coming for her all the same. Her breathing quickened. "Mom, do you own something? Do you have money, property, assets, things you never told me about?" I let the silence stretch, not cruelly, but intentionally. Melissa had spent a lifetime talking over quiet truths. If she wanted this answer, she needed to sit with its weight. "I have lived for many years," I finally said, "and in those years, I have built things, protected things, preserved things." She stared at me, jaw slack. She wanted specifics, but she also feared them. "Are you saying," she whispered, "that you've been pretending to be struggling?" "No," I said, meeting her gaze. "I've been pretending to be small enough for you to manage." Her throat bobbed. "You've made decisions?" she asked. "Real ones? Legal ones? Without me?" "Yes." "That's not fair," she said, voice cracking like thin ice. "I should have known. I deserve to know." I rose slowly, feeling every year of my age, yet none of its weakness. "What you deserve, Melissa," I said softly, "is honesty." I stepped closer, close enough to see the fear widening her eyes. "And the truth is," I continued, "you have no authority over my life. Not legally, not financially, not anymore." She stumbled back a step. "What? What have you done?" she breathed. But it wasn't a question. It was a realization. And she was only beginning to understand how much she never knew. Melissa left my apartment that afternoon with a look I hadn't seen on her face since she was a child. Something between fear and disbelief. the expression of someone who suddenly realizes the ground beneath them isn't solid. I didn't follow her to the door. I didn't speak another word. She needed the silence more than she needed answers. People often think truth is delivered in shouts, but sometimes it arrives like a quiet draft under a door, undeniable, cold, and impossible to unfeel. The next 3 days told me exactly how shaken she was. She didn't visit, she didn't call, but the building whispered on her behalf. Tenants stopped me in the hallway, puzzled. "Mrs. Hayes, your daughter was asking about emergency contacts. Should we be concerned?" "She asked if I'd noticed you slipping," another said. "I told her you seemed sharper than the rest of us." Someone else added, "She cornered Finch in the lobby for 20 minutes. Poor man looked ready to faint." By the 4th day, even the elevator seemed to sense the tension, creaking louder whenever Melissa stepped inside, as if protesting her impatience. She was digging, hard, and much closer to the truth than she realized. By late afternoon, I heard her footsteps approaching my door, hurried, uneven. She didn't knock politely this time. She hammered her fist against the wood. "Mom, open the door." I did. She stormed in like wind through an open window, scattered, breathless, visibly shaken. She didn't sit. She didn't greet me. She went straight to the center of the room and spun to face me. I found the trust. The room went still. I didn't feign surprise. There was no point. Her hands trembled as she held up a printout, blurred from being folded and unfolded too many times. "I couldn't see the details," she went on, voice cracking, "but I saw enough. It's registered under a private trustee. The address is this building, Mom, this building." She pressed the papers against her chest. "And Finch, he all but admitted the owner lives here." Her breathing hitched. "It's you, isn't it?" I didn't answer. Silence, I'd learned, can be a confession more powerful than words. Her face twisted. Anger, fear, humiliation, all tangled together. "How long?" she demanded. "How long have you been hiding this from me?" "Years," I answered softly. She staggered back a step, as if the truth had weight. "Years," she repeated. "Years? While I worried about money? While I begged you to be reasonable? While I carried everything on my shoulders?" "You carried," I said gently, "what you chose to carry, not what I asked of you." She shook her head wildly. "No, no, no. This doesn't make sense. You lived like someone barely getting by. You never said a word. Never hinted? Why?" "Because some things aren't meant to be displayed like trophies." But I didn't say that. Instead, I met her gaze evenly. Because peace was easier than disclosure. Until it wasn't. Melissa covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes filling, not with sorrow, but with something darker. A kind of betrayal only people who feel entitled ever experience. "So while I was panicking about the rent increase," she said slowly, "you already knew everything." "Yes. And while everyone else is terrified of being priced out of their homes, I have plans in place," I said, cutting gently but firmly, "that protect those who need protection." Her eyes widened. "Plans? Without me?" I held her gaze. "Especially without you." Her breath came in sharp bursts. "Mom, you can't just cut me out." "I haven't cut you out of my life," I said. "Only out of my decisions." She fell silent. Completely. Her shoulders shook once, then stilled. Finally, in a hoarse whisper, she said, "What did you do?" And I answered with the truth she had been circling all week. "I took back what was mine. Every piece of it." Melissa closed her eyes. She finally understood. Maybe not the full picture. Not yet. But she understood enough to know. The story she'd told herself, of a fragile mother waiting to be managed, was ending. And the real story, the one she'd never imagined, was already unfolding beneath her feet. The morning Melissa learned the truth began colder than any day that season. Frost clung to the edges of the courtyard grass, and the air outside my window was so still it felt like the world was holding its breath. Fitting, I thought. Some truths deserve a quiet stage. I had just finished my tea when my phone buzzed. An unfamiliar number. Mrs. Hayes? Yes? This is Jacob Finch. I wanted to inform you that your daughter is on her way to my office. She demanded a meeting regarding her lease terms. I assumed you might want to be aware. His voice carried that restrained tension of a man preparing for an unpleasant encounter. Thank you, Jacob, I said. Let her speak. It's time. He exhaled, relieved to have permission. I hung up and sat still for a long moment, listening to the small hum of the refrigerator, the faint groans of the building settling. This place had sheltered so much of my life, my joys, my grief, my quiet survival. And now it would shelter the moment Melissa finally saw the truth she'd been scraping toward for weeks. Around noon, I made my way downstairs. Not to intervene, just to be present. The office door was slightly ajar. Voices seeped through the crack, one strained with desperation, the other steady and measured. I'm her daughter, Melissa insisted. I have a right to know who owns this building. Jacob's tone remained polite. I'm sorry, but ownership details are part of a protected trust. I cannot release— Don't play dumb, she snapped. You've been hiding something. She's been hiding something. I know it. I stepped into the doorway. Melissa didn't notice me at first. She was gripping the arms of the tenant chair, leaning forward as if trying to force information out of the air. Ms. Hayes, Jacob began carefully, your lease renewal will be sent next week. If affordability is a concern— A concern? She barked a bitter laugh. My mother is losing her mind. My finances are a mess, and now you expect me to swallow another rent increase? Why won't anyone tell me who owns this damn place? Jacob straightened in his chair. His eyes flicked toward me, just for a heartbeat. He took that breath professionals take before revealing something delicate. Ms. Hayes, he said slowly, your landlord is not a company. Melissa frowned. So? Then who— It's a person. Her expression shifted, first confusion, then a dawning horror. A person? She repeated. Someone in this building? Yes. Her breathing grew uneven. Who is it? Jacob hesitated. Not because he doubted, but because he understood the weight of what came next. Finally, he turned slightly, looking past her, toward me. Melissa followed his gaze. Her eyes widened, sharpened, then froze entirely. No, she whispered. No, that's impossible. I stepped fully into the doorway. Hello, Melissa. She stared as if seeing me for the first time in her life. Not her elderly mother, not the woman she'd spoken down to for years, not the fragile presence she tried to maneuver like a chess piece, but the owner, the trustee, the decision-maker, the person she'd been demanding to meet. You? She breathed. You own this entire building? Jacob spoke gently. Mrs. Hayes has owned it for decades, through a trust established long before most of our current tenants moved in. Melissa shook her head violently, as if trying to dislodge the truth. No, she can barely climb the stairs some days. She lives like she's struggling. She asked me for help. I asked, I said softly, because it mattered to you to be needed. Not because I required it. She pressed a trembling hand over her mouth. And the increases, she said weakly. The policies. All the decisions. Approved by me, I confirmed. Everyone. She stared at the floor, her shoulders folding inward. Why didn't you tell me? I approached her, slowly, gently. Because you never asked to understand me. Only to manage me. Her breath caught. A small, painful sound. You said I was waiting to die, I continued, my voice soft as worn cloth. But I was waiting for the moment when you would see me. Not as something fragile, not as someone you could rearrange, but as myself. She lifted her head then, eyes rimmed red. Mom, she whispered. I didn't know. No, I said. You didn't want to know. Silence settled between us. Heavy. Necessary. In that stillness, Melissa finally realized the power she believed she held was never hers, and the woman she believed was fading had never disappeared. She had simply stopped being small. Melissa didn't speak at first. She just stood there in Finch's small office, staring at me as though the world had tilted beneath her feet. For years, she had moved around me as if I were a piece of fragile furniture, something to be dusted, shifted, eventually removed. Now she looked at me with the disorientation of someone realizing the furniture had a voice, and a deed, and a spine. Mom, she whispered, her voice thinning at the edges. How could you keep something like this from me? I walked past her and rested my hand lightly on the back of a chair. My fingers no longer shook when I stood my ground. Melissa, I didn't keep it from you. I simply lived my life without announcing its every detail. But you let me believe you were... She swallowed, the word catching, struggling. I never asked you for money, I said. You came offering strings disguised as help. She flinched. And when I tried to set boundaries, I continued, you answered with fear, not love. Fear that I would make choices without you. Fear that you would lose control. And now that the truth is here, you're afraid again. Her eyes glistened, not from sorrow, from recognition. I wasn't trying to hurt you, she said. I thought you needed guidance. You confused guidance, I replied softly, with ownership. Jacob rose from behind his desk discreetly, nodding to me before slipping out, leaving us alone. Melissa sank into the nearest chair, the papers trembling in her hands. So what happens now? She asked. I sat across from her, lowering myself with the ease of someone who no longer carries invisible weight. Now, I said, you stop looking at me as though I'm nearing an ending. I'm still living, Melissa. Still choosing. Still capable. A tear finally escaped down her cheek. She brushed it away quickly, embarrassed. I'd gotten so used to thinking of you as fading. I reached across the table, not to comfort her, but to steady the truth. I am aging, I said. Not disappearing. She let out a long, unsteady breath. Will you forgive me? I already did, I answered. Long before today. But forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. Her gaze lifted. Am I part of your plans? At all? You are part of my life, I said gently, but not of my decisions. Those belong to me. She nodded slowly, absorbing the truth she had avoided for years. And then, with a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from her, she said, I don't want to lose you. You won't, I said, but you will have to meet me where I am now, standing, not bending. We walked out of the office together, quietly. The winter sun hit the hallway in a long, pale beam. Melissa lingered there, caught between old habits and a life that suddenly felt different. I stepped into the light, For the first time in decades, it felt like it belonged to me. And as I walked toward the elevator, my dignity settled around me like a shawl I had finally remembered how to wear. I had not waited to die. I had waited to live again on my own terms. And I had succeeded. If this story touched you, stay with me. Leave a comment. Share your thoughts. Your voice matters here.